Okay, so the last thing that we talked about was a motor unit. So this is a picture of a motor unit down here. This is the nerve, and this is the muscle fiber. So we said that when the neuron or the nerve releases a chemical called a neurotransmitter, it gets basically allows ions to flow into the muscle, and that signals muscle contraction. So what we're going to do now is we're going to take a look inside this muscle and talk about, so what happens to cause the muscle to contract? Like what's happening inside the muscle to get it to contract? So I like to start with the word contract. So the word contract means to get shorter. So the muscle here, if I'm talking about my bicep, in order for it to move the bone down here, all right, so the bicep bends the arm at the elbow like this, or flexes the arm at the elbow. We should have learned that in the last unit. So what happens is it gets shorter. Contract means to get shorter. So the size or the length of the muscle gets shorter. And when it does, that's why it sort of bulges here, all right, up, because it is like taking up less space, all right, and it's bulging. And then when it does, because those tendons are attached down here to the lower arm, it pulls on that bone and causes it to move. All right, so what's happening in here is when it receives a signal, it contracts, gets shorter, bulges up. I know nobody, don't be embarrassed with my huge bulge, ha 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 ha. All right, but it bulges up and it causes that to pull on that bone and it causes movement. All right, so it contracts and it gets shorter. So muscles have the special ability to be able to shorten, whereas most tissue is not able to do that. So how does that happen? So when that signal is received, there are protein fibers in the muscle. This is why when we eat meat, we're eating other organisms' muscles, and we're getting protein out of that, right? Because it's made up of protein fibers. So the two protein fibers that are found in muscles are called myosin and actin. And they are arranged in a particular way in smooth cardiac and skeletal muscle to allow for, remember we talked about whether they were striated or not, so I hope that you're going to get to see those striations here, because remember skeletal muscle is striated. So the two muscles here, so a couple terms, let me go here. First I'm going to start with the word sarcomere. So a sarcomere is like a muscle cell. And that is represented here. So think of this as a muscle cell. And these end lines is like the cell membrane. That's called the Z line or the Z disc. So think of, and this is one over here too. Think of Z as the end of the alphabet. All right, it's the end of the muscle cell, right? So that stays in place. And then these protein fibers are attached, to the Z lines, all right? And what's going to happen is it's going to pull that in and cause it to contract, all right? So we'll see that here in a second. So the two protein fibers that are found, there's a thinner protein fiber. This is called actin. It's the blue one here, and actin is typically the thinner fiber. And then there's myosin, which is the thicker fiber, and that's this one here, the red one, that has like these little hands on it, all right? So that's typically the thick fiber. And what happens is when it receives the message, myosin goes up and these little hands grab onto actin and they pull it in, all right, like this. They sort of ratchet it in. And since actin is attached to the Z line, it pulls this whole thing in closer together. The myosin stays put, but the actin moves inwards towards each other, thereby pulling the ends of the lines, and this is happening all throughout the muscle, and it's going to cause it to get shorter. I'm going to show you a video on that here in a second, okay? So what that will look like is, all right, so here's like relaxed. When it receives that message, the myosin will go up, grab onto the actin, pull it in. So you can see that there's space here in between the actin fibers. And then when it pulls it in, you can see that, again, here's the Z line, here's the ends of the muscle cell. You can see that they start here. If you go down, they get closer together. They contract. And the space here in the middle shortens. the size of the actin and the size of the myosin do not change. It's just going up there and grabbing onto that and pulling it inwards, all right? So you can see the ends, the length of from Z line to Z line goes towards one another, shortens, all right, which causes the muscle to contract. Okay, so I'm going to show you that, and then I'm going to come back and show you something here. So very quickly, here, I have it up. Here, nope, that's not it, that's me. Here it is. Oh, maybe I don't have it up. All right, so let me go here and actually, I might have it here. I'll get there. There we go. Muscular system. Here is what I want. Come on. Here we go. All right, so this is. All right, so this will show you the sliding filament. So actin is blue, myosin is pink, and when it receives the message of calcium moving in, notice that, see how that moves in? And that's happening all along the muscle fiber, so the whole thing contracts. All right, so relaxed, contract. When calcium goes away, it relaxes. All right, when those channels close, when it goes into the muscle, it signals it to contract and slide. So notice that the actin is sliding over the myosin, which is why this is called the sliding filament theory. So here it shows you these little heads here on the arms of the myosin, all right, and how the calcium sort of moves things on the actin and allows myosin to grab on and pull it. So this shows you pretty good. Right? It pulls it and it pulls it in. So they have these little arms that grab onto the actin and pull it in. All right, and I'm going to put this video in Schoology for you so that you can see that. All right, but so that's what's going on here when it receives that message. It pulls on there and it slides over one another, and when it does, the whole muscle shortens, all right? It takes up less space, pulls on this bone and causes contraction. All right, so that's called called the sliding, go back, filament, all right, theory. So because the one filament or fiber slides over the other. All right, so one last thing just to show you. Remember I said that the arrangement of these protein fibers makes the skeletal muscle striated. So I'm just going to go back a couple slides here and show you this. So I think you can see on here, you see that there's like these lines, and under the microscope, I'm going to see this under the microscope, and it's going to look striated, right? It's going to look striped. Remember, skeletal muscle is striated. And it's because of the arrangement of actin and myosin that this appears striated under the microscope. So I'm going to go up to this one. So basically myosin, because it's the thicker filament, you're going to be able to see that under the microscope, all right? Because it's just going to look darker, it's going to look thicker, and I'm going to be able to see that and pick that up. So where there is myosin, this is called the A band. Think of A for dark because the A in dark. So that's the darker band. I can see that under the microscope. But then notice here, right here where there's no myosin, before I would have like another myosin over here, right? I would just have repeating patterns of this all along the muscle. Right here, in between there, this is called, so this part is called the I band, where I don't see anything under the microscope, and that stands for light band with the I, all right? And so it's this repeating pattern. Dark, I can see it under the microscope. A lighter area, I can't see anything under the microscope. A darker area where there's myosin again. and I can see that under the microscope. So because of that sort of repeating patterns back and forth, I can go here. All right, so down here, I can see this. That's where myosin is. There's nothing in between. That's where the actin is. There's myosin again, right? And myosin again, right? This repeating pattern of this over and over again throughout the muscle fiber produces the striations that we talked about with skeletal muscle. All right, so we know that cardiac muscle is also striated, so it has similar patterns like this. Smooth muscle also has actin and myosin, but it's arranged differently, so you don't see that striated pattern under the microscope. All right, it's just because of the arrangements of these protein fibers. Okay? All right, so what you're going to do is you are going to diagram and show me the sliding filament theory. So you're going to show whether you use stop motion or whether you draw successive pictures. You're going to basically draw this, and I want you to label actin, myosin, Z-line. You can even do the I band and the A band. All right, and so you're going to start like this, like it relaxed. And you're going to show it repeatedly, like slowly, going in. And again, if you want to animate it, you can use some things on your iPad, like flip a clip and things. You can show it slowly going in, and then I want you to show it then relaxing too. Key thing to remember, and what I see as the most common mistake, is notice that the length of the actin and myosin never change, right? It's just that the ends move in and the actin moves in, but it stays the same length. One of the most common mistakes that I see when people do this is they'll do something that looks like this, right? So here's my myosin, and I'll do it in a different color. Here's my actin. Oh, that's sort of bad. All right, something like this, okay? And they'll show me this. And then the next slide, what they do is they just make these go longer, like in towards each other to decrease that space. All right, so they'll show me the next slide. Looks like this. The actin got longer and it's attached. But notice that that's not contraction because the distance between the myosin and the Z-line never shortened. All you did was lengthen the actin. That does not show contraction because remember that my Z-lines have to move closer to each other in order to be contracted. So it's like that this whole thing here will move together. Like all my purple stuff will move in together, touch, or overlap, and then move back out, right? But the lengths of the actin and myosin don't change. Okay, so when you do that, just be careful. You can use my chalk markers to do it. You can use Play-Doh and create actin and myosin, all right, and show that moving. However you want to do this, you're going to work with a partner and sort of diagram or animate the sliding filament. Okay, so that's your job now. Okay, that's all I have.